We know that buying a home can be really stressful, and in your past purchase of a home, you may have made a few mistakes that you'd like to iron out this time around. So, we're here to tell you how to smooth out the home buying process and make it easy.
All right, let's get started.
I'm Andy Haven.
And I'm Holly Haven, and we are the Haven Home Team. We are here to not only help you become a homeowner, but really help you become a Texan. So let's dive in, Andy. What are a few of the things that we see every single day that we want to help our clients avoid?
Yeah, so we see that a lot of people do not look at their down payment assistance programs. There's a lot of options for down payment assistance, lots of things that people may not understand. What is your favorite down payment assistance program, or is there anything that you like to suggest to your clients?
Yeah, really mine are more industry based. So a lot of first responders, educators, there are some limitations around the down payment assistance. So it's not a good fit for every client. And sometimes it creates some other hurdles within the process. But we've had clients that really take advantage of whether it's a VA loan option if they're a veteran, or like I said, some of these other first responders. I know some first time home buyer programs and grants that can be really helpful. The biggest downside to some of those is they will limit where you can purchase
Yeah.
for those grants to be.
Especially the grants, yeah, and especially depending on the county. I know in Collin County, a lot of areas in Collin County do not allow grants. So that's definitely something to consider whenever you're applying for a grant.
Yep. So there's definitely some things out there. Just knowing to ask, what are my options? What can I get? Really working with a local broker, mortgage broker, will make a big difference because they have more than one loan package they can put together. They have lots of lenders they can, pull different options from. So it gives us a little more flexibility.
Yeah, for sure.
This one is probably the number one thing we try to avoid with all of our clients and for multiple reasons, but it's not starting that lending pre-approval process early enough.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they're like, well, why would I start so soon? I may have to pay extra money. Well, but what if you find your dream house, you can't put your application in because you're not pre-qualified for the home?
Yep, absolutely. We do not show homes that we cannot qualify for. And we do not know if we can qualify for a home until the lender has looked at the documentation and really given us that stamp of approval that says we're good to go. We don't want our clients to fall in love with a house they absolutely cannot afford. Sometimes what we feel like we can afford, we've run some numbers online. We walk into that house and then we can't get qualified for it. And it's really more heartbreaking. It doesn't do us any favors. The buyers end up being a little bit depressed. They feel like they're having to settle for a home because the first one was out of budget.
Yeah. Well, and the worst thing you can do is become house poor. Like that's very unfortunate. It's really, really hard to get out of. And that's one of the most expensive purchases you're going to make in your entire life. So it's really, really, it's kind of a serious thing. Like you need to make sure that you can afford that home. And that's the whole purpose of the pre-qualification. Also, if you think, oh, well, I'm buying my home with cash, I don't need a pre-approval. We still need some proof of funds so that we can get you into that home. When you make an offer, they're going to wonder where's your money? How can you pay for this home? What are your options? So that's another thing. Even if you are paying cash, we still need some type of proof of funds for that.
Yep. So starting that process early, putting you in the best position and setting our clients up for success. That's what we're looking to do.
For sure.
All right. Okay, Andy, what benefit is it to a buyer to not hire a professional realtor?
Oh my gosh, the benefit is that they have so much stress. That's so beneficial, right?
Absolutely. So most people do know this. The way our industry works right now is that the commissions are paid by the seller. So when I sign a listing agreement with a seller, we agree to a commission structure, and I agree to pay a percentage or a portion of that commission to the buyer's agent to entice them to come and work with us. So as the buyer's agent who walks in and says, hey, I don't have an agent, I want to save some money, that's not necessarily how it works because the agreement and the contract on those commission funds are between the listing agent and the seller. It has nothing to do with the buyer other than an agreement to pay the other party representing the buyer.
Yeah. Well, and something people don't consider is if you don't have a realtor, the listing agent is the one working overtime for you. You're not just representing yourself. That's really not how it works, unfortunately. Somebody has to explain the contract to you because you are not a licensed realtor or typically an attorney. I mean, maybe you are, but that's a whole different scenario. But you have to really consider the fact that the listing agent is working for you. You don't just have no realtor.
Well, and that listing agent is representing the seller. They are everything they're putting in front of you is on the seller's benefit.
100%.
So having that agent in your corner working for you while you're at work all day we're at work all day too, but we're at work working for you. So it's definitely in your best interest to have a professional realtor. We can run comps. We know if a home is overpriced. We have all of the referrals, right? We work with the title companies and the third-party inspectors and the lender options. We have all of these great resources that we work with every single day. And so really our entire job is to just be a resource for our clients and to kind of have that fiduciary duty where we need to work on your fiduciary purposes, right? We're there for you. We are not representing the seller if we are representing you as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
So you're not
Well, and
really saving money.
a lot of issues whenever you represent yourself in a transaction, you're not going to catch all of the loopholes that the listing agent may be putting towards you. Like, you may not realize that you're paying for the title fee. Right. You may not realize that you're paying for the survey. Those are huge expenses that add up that could be more expensive than just using a realtor, if we're being honest. So
yeah, for sure. So definitely, do some referrals, definitely interview some agents, make sure that you guys have good communication styles that work together. And like I said, by getting those referrals, you want to make sure that that person who referred them has actually worked with them. They have some really good context behind this agent, and they can really say, hey, they're a go-getter. They're great. You're going to love them for whatever reason. So do your due diligence there before you dive in. It's a free service to you, but you want to get your money's worth, right?
for sure.
Well, this one's kind of a good one because buying a home can be really, really stressful. So whether we are buying a pre-existing home or a new construction home, there's this process we go through, right? And if you don't do this every day and you're spending $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or millions of dollars, right? It's stressful. So what are the differences between minor issues and major issues?
Yeah. So recently, actually, I have a story. I walked through a condo that was built in 2005. Obviously, there were some structural issues. There was some foundation, roof, stuff like that. But when you look at a condo, the condo company actually, like the HOA, takes care of all of the big outside things. So the paint, the foundation, and the roof. Big money items. So my client was like, oh my goodness, these are big money items. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of work to be done. And the little things that he was going to have to do were maybe less than $5,000 over time. It wasn't anything that prevented him from moving in. So at the end of the day, a major item is something that would prevent you from actually living in the home comfortably. A minor issue would be, oh, I don't like the tile in the bathroom. Oh, the toilet's too old. Like, if the toilet still works, that's not a big deal, So I think at the end of the day, it's something that it's kind of opinion based, what's major and what's minor to you. Kind of have to go into the aspect of like what's necessary and what's something I want.
Yep, absolutely. And you made a great point there on that condo, for example. The major issues became not major to the property owner. Those are major issues that are going to be clarified and resolved through the HOA and the condo. So it kind of changed the conversation a little bit. Even though those are major situations, they're going to be resolved. And so the buyer won't actually be on the hook for that. So really just understanding, it can be really scary to say, oh, that HVAC is 10 years old. Well, the HVAC probably has a life of 20 plus years. So is it really that major? It might just be that it needs to be maintained. It needs to be cleaned. There's some things we can definitely help walk our clients through based on inspection reports, our own experience, and really just helping you have that resource to say, is this a major concern? Because if we hear that there might be foundation structural issues, we're going to dig deeper and find out how big of a concern it might be. I had one recently where we thought there was foundation issues. After the inspection report, the engineers came in, they did a quick check, and they said, actually, the foundation's great, has a little movement, which is really normal in North Texas, but it became a non-issue at all. So we were able to just resolve that, jump that hurdle, and move on towards closing.
Yeah, I think another thing that buyers need to consider is what a minor crack versus a major crack looks like. If there are small cracks in the top corners, that is not a horrible issue. If the beam in the living room is cracked in half, okay, maybe a major issue. I think there's just a lot of learning that needs to be done as a buyer, that when you walk through a home and you see a few cracks and you're like, oh my God, the house is falling apart. It's not falling apart. We live in Texas and the house moves after the first 2 years like crazy. So just something to consider.
Yeah, we use those as red flags. We say, let's have it looked at, and we let the professional come in and give us their professional guidance so that we are not going into something with an unclear picture or an unclear direction on resolution. So that's what we're here for. Guide, be a resource, and help you through those questions so they become not a concern and we can move forward. That brought us right to our next point, getting a third-party inspection.
Yeah, this is so important. And this is another reason that having a realtor is important, because there are times that if you want to represent yourself and you think, oh my gosh, this house is incredible. We're not going to have any problems. We get to closing and the foundation is screwed. That's on you. You're the buyer now. You own that home and you're left with those issues.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things, something that kind of goes into this, right? We have a third party, or I'm sorry, a seller's disclosure from the seller. What that means is the seller is required by law to pass off any information they know about the property, especially negative information. If there was ever a flood in the house, right? If they know that they have foundation issues. So here's the thing. I will say in the majority of my experience, I have never had a seller knowingly, willingly be untruthful.
Yeah.
We have gone into properties the day after closing and had sewer backup in the shower. It didn't happen when the seller lived there, or the seller would have been dealing with sewer in the shower. It happened the day my buyers moved in. Yeah. So it becomes a little bit tricky. The buyers are mad at the seller, but really there was nothing to be found because the situation didn't exist until the day after we purchased. It was just an unfortunate situation. But going through a third-party inspection, looking at that seller's disclosure, having all of the information together gives us a much bigger picture. We can even have that third-party inspector, they can scope all of the sewer lines. They can scope all the way out, to where it connects in the city. So we have a lot of options to really get a good picture of the maintenance and the longevity of the systems in the house.
Well, and most people buy a very basic inspection, which is awesome. It's very, very, very detailed. There are so many add-ons to an inspection. You can look for anything that you may be afraid of in a home. You can look for it. Yep. Obviously, it costs more, but it's better to pay the fee up front than pay the fee at the end when it's way more expensive.
A pool is my favorite example, pool and septic systems. And so if you're buying a property and it's on a couple of acres, you're likely to have a septic system. And if you've never worked with a septic system or lived with one, you're going to need a little bit of education on that.
Yeah.
And understanding if the septic system has been maintained properly and if it's functioning properly, that's going to be really important to you guys. But then, just things like the pool pumps, pool filters. Are there any leaks in the pool?
Well, a lot of times you can't see that.
No, for sure. Like you have no idea until it's too late. And now you're dealing with some really expensive things, but there's some things they can find in the pool inspection. And so those are some things we'll talk about when there's a pool involved, but it is really, really important just to have that full third-party inspection. And we do this with new construction as well.
Mm-hmm. That's also really important because a lot of builders will try to cut corners. Depending on the county, where we live in Collin County, our inspections are so thorough that really nothing can get past, but it is one of those things where if you're building a new home, you want to be involved in that entire process because you may catch things that they don't.
Yeah, and you usually will. You got to remember, humans are building homes. There are going to be errors. There are going to be things that are overlooked. Even with 3, 4, 5 eyes, different inspection points, things are going to be missed. Or something could have been done just slightly better. So those inspections, we can do them at 3 phases. We can do them literally pre-slab, where they're looking at all of the rough plumbing. We can do it at pre-drywall, where they're looking at all of the wiring, all of the framing, all of the ductwork. They really have a good visual. And then we do that pre-move-in, post-construction. So really the final look, the final touches. And we've had some really strange things come up in final touches. We had a bathroom recently in it's a new build. We were literally, there was a builder crazy. And the tile just looked like everything went at an angle. Nothing, it was like being in the clown house. Like,
no, yeah, it looked like everything was like,
and when we, the inspector actually pointed it out, we looked at it and we were like, what is happening in here? And so the builder ended up having to physically move a wall. They had
because the wall was crooked. It was a tile.
And it was interesting that the inspector was the first person to catch it. If you weren't really looking at everything in detail, you just it took you a minute to be like, oh, what is happening? The floors felt weird. So there's definitely a benefit to having that unbiased third party who doesn't work for the builder, doesn't work for the seller, they're just in there to say, hey, this is it's a red flag and we should check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on down the list.
So I think many times when people look at their budget, they're like, well, I have $400,000 to spend. I can only afford a house that was built in 1995. And I think we all need to take that into consideration, that there are so many options for every single budget. A lot of times builders, they offer a lot of incentives. So if you're looking in the $400,000 budget and maybe you find a house for $395 and you're like, oh my gosh, that's the top of my budget. A lot of times they will offer incentives that lower that price just a little bit. There's also a lot of times where maybe a new home, one that's built and they're closing out a sale, that might be your best option as well because they offer a lot of incentives there as well. So I just think with this point, what I'm getting at is that even if you think you have a small budget, you may still apply for a lot of new builds, a lot of inventory homes, and not just pre-owned homes that are 20 years old.
Yeah, and being a little bit flexible on location is going to be really important. The closer we are to city center, the more expensive the property is going to be for less finished out or older homes. So really giving yourself the opportunity to say, hey, if I was willing to drive 10 more minutes, to work, if I was willing to do these other things, what could I get? And so having an open mind, and sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes the commute is the biggest factor. And that's okay. We'll always work with our clients to find the home that is best for them. But we do want to always educate and give you guys options too. So if we're seeing like, gosh, you guys really aren't loving what's in your price point in the location, we'll try to widen that net a little bit and show you that there might be some other options. So definitely keeping an open mind and understanding that you may not be locked into one style of home or one type of home or one age of home. You might actually have some really good options.
Well, and I think this happens a lot of times with out-of-state buyers who come to Texas and want to move to Texas because depending on where you're from, if you're from maybe New York, if you're from honestly anywhere up north, a lot of the homes do tend to be a little bit older. New build communities are not very common up there, and they use completely different materials. So coming down here, you're expecting to get what you used to have in New York, which very expensive, very low quality. That's typically what happens, and they're a lot older. And you move to Texas and you're like, oh my gosh, well, that's what I'm used to. And you don't realize you can afford a brand new home. So I just think that we've gone through that with many clients, and I just think it's something that everybody needs to be a little bit more open to.
Yeah, just education, and that's what we're here for. Guide and a resource. I think I've said that a few times.
A few.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's what we're here for. All right, what else do we got? Andy, how much do you love this conversation from your buyer? Okay, this home is amazing. I love it. I have to have it, but I want to get a good deal. It's been on the market 2 days. Let's make an offer below list price because, no, it's great, Andy. I love the house.
No, you do?
Yes, and I have to have it.
Are you willing to offer full price?
No, ma'am. I want a good deal.
That is ridiculous. Do you go to your grocery store and say, this 20 pounds of meat is awesome and I want it tonight, but it's not on sale, but I want it on sale. So can you put it on sale? Like, no, they don't just do that for fun.
No. So that's where the expertise of the realtor comes in. Guys, here's the deal. When I'm working with a buyer, I want you guys to get the absolute best house for the best price. I want all the wins. And when I'm working for a seller, I want us to sell that house in the least amount of time for the most amount of money, right? I always have a different motivation depending on who my client is. But I also like to be really transparent and realistic with our clients. And if you're going to lose this house that you love over $5,000 that you're going to pay out over 30 years.
For a total of $10 a month.
Oh, maybe. So guys, we love you and we want to bargain for you.
There's also other ways to bargain that's just not off the top of the list price. There's other ways to negotiate with a seller that maybe will be more desirable to them than lowering their list price $20,000 for you on day 3.
Absolutely. And that's the other, I'm glad you just said day 3 because those are the factors, right? A house has been on the market 60, 70, 80 days. Man, I'm all in. Let's go make a lowball offer. Let's see what they'll take. But more often than not, this is not the same house that my client loves and has to have because it's the most beautiful house in the neighborhood. It fits my budget, but I want it for $5,000 less. These are totally different conversations. So I think really just having a true understanding of what's happening in that specific neighborhood. And because you think it's overpriced, the data tells us what we need to know. And so we run the numbers.
For sure.
Okay. I know I got like a little angry there for a second.
It really does.
Sorry. Okay, only getting a quote from one lender.
That is the stupidest mistake ever. I'll be honest.
I was angry. She told you stupid.
I mean, I am going through the process right now. And if I went with the first lender that I got a quote from, I would not be getting the best deal. I'll be completely honest. I would not be benefiting myself the way that another lender could be benefiting me. And it's not the lender's fault. It's just simply the fact that there are different plans for different people. And not every lender services every single thing that you need for your loan. So also, another thing that I learned through this process is you can service as many loan officers as you'd like, or get a quote from as many loan officers as you'd like in a 45-day period, and it only hits your credit once. It only shows as one credit check. So you can ask 5 lenders for their opinion on your loan, and it will only hit your credit once. So that's something that's very important to consider.
Yeah, and for us, we always refer at least 2 to 3 lenders. Usually we will pick the lenders that we work with that fit your needs the best or seem like they're going to fit your needs the best. So we have some great referrals and resources. We only refer lenders that we would personally work with, we have personally worked with, or we've worked with a lot with clients and only have good referrals and like basically 5-star service.
Yeah.
The other little side note to that is the builder's lender incentive or lender option is not always the best deal. It looks really good on paper. It's, $8,000, $10,000 incentive. We'll do all these things. And then when you start to compare, the lender that maybe we're going to work with versus the builder lender, the numbers don't match up. And that builder loan may actually be more expensive in the long term.
But it also depends on what your needs are as a buyer, because if you need that $10,000 back from the seller so you can buy down your rate, and that is just going to be the best option for you, then it might be worth it to pay a little bit higher fees. Because the only way you can buy down your rate is with a seller concession, which is money back from the seller. So that's kind of, at the end of the day, if that's what you need, that's what you need. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why knowing what position you're in before we start making offers is imperative, because it's really going to set you up for success, allow us to make the best offers on your behalf and ask for the right things that we need from sellers. And then there's a lot of things we can do in the contract to kind of move the numbers around to make everything work for both parties in a lot of cases.
Well, and going off of that, I think a lot of buyers and sellers are very kind of nervous about sharing their personal finances with us. But I'll be honest, I see things every single day that I'm like, wow, that is so crazy. But at the end of the day, like, there is always ways to improve. There's always ways that we can find loopholes. Like, just because you maybe have bad credit, or maybe you were foreclosed on 10 years ago, like, there are options for everybody. And I'm sure we have seen it all at this point.
We have. And we don't see the majority of your personal finances.
No,
we
for
see the big picture. So, really what we want is you and your lender to have that conversation. You get to give them all the dirty details, and we just get the paper that says what you're qualified for. We don't really care about the rest, because the seller doesn't care as long as they know they're going to get paid and that your loan is going to be good. The next tip we have is really for after you've purchased the home, and it's the homestead exemption.
Yeah, and this one I just added, actually, because I was on my way here and I was like, okay, a lot of people recently that I've talked to do not even know what that is. And that blows my mind, because if you live in Collin County and you don't have a homestead exemption,
you're out of luck.
We need to talk.
Out of luck.
So crazy.
Yeah, so here's what happens with the homestead exemption. As soon as you take possession of the house, you have to have a current updated driver's license with that physical address on it. And you have to file paperwork with the county. It is a free process. It's a super simple form. You tell them, hey, this is my homestead, and I want you guys to treat it as a homestead, which means they will give you the valuation of your home, and then they cannot increase that more than 10% every year moving forward. Here's what has happened this last 18 months or so that is really hitting people hard. We had a huge property value increase over the last 2 years. If you bought the home for, let's say that the home was previously valued at $500,000. You bought the home for $550,000, but today it's actually valued at $650,000. The appraisal district, the minute you buy the house, that old homestead, that old value goes away. They reevaluate the property at current prices. This came up with a client this week. She said, oh my gosh, they are valuing us maybe, I think it was like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 more than what they had paid. So normally we never, ever, ever share what we paid for a property with the county, because we don't have to in the state of Texas. And I told her, you need to appeal and you need to send them this document. It shows that you only paid X amount of dollars, and that should be your valuation. They still may not go straight back to that total lower number, but they should give her something at least in between, and it takes it off of that top number. So here's the thing, because the property had homestead, she filed homestead when she was supposed to, that does not protect you from the old value to the new value when the buyer changed. So it gets a little bit tricky. We can definitely go into this in detail. If this is something you're dealing with or that you're worried about, reach out to us. Let us give you a little coaching, a little education on that. We'll provide comps for you. We do all those things for free. But we just really, our only goal is to truly make sure our clients are educated about the process. They feel confident moving forward. And that, when we close and we're done, we want them to love us. We want them to call us back in 5 years when they need to, upsize or downsize. So our goal is really to be in your corner, be a resource for you, and really build a relationship and be here for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have any more questions, or if you're a buyer that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going through all of these things, or I've been through these things in the past, send us a message. You can always message us on Facebook, Instagram. All of our emails and information are down below. And if you have any questions, we're always here.
Yep. Like, subscribe, follow us here on YouTube, and check the comments below. There will be a buyer's guide there that has a lot of this information in there and some additional information.
Bye, guys.
Bye.